Good evening, everyone. We are
Bill, how are
getting
you?
ready to start here.
How are you? Yeah.
You can do all the Bonita stuff, huh?
Well, yeah, they've been known to do that.
Oh, okay.
Because either they call me or I just show up, and that's
Oh,
the way
okay.
it goes.
Good evening. My name is Arlene Hunter. I'm the city manager, and we thank you for joining us this evening. We do have a sign-in sheet right by the front door, and we also have comment cards for anyone who'd like to provide comments, but you can also email us here at the city, myself or our city clerk, Debbie Philippek, with any comments. This is the midpoint, I would say, of our process in implementing a form-based code. There is a current draft which we'll be providing to City Council for tomorrow evening. And the last time we met back in February, February 5th, we had a workshop, and February 6th, the council asked us to move forward as due diligently as we could in keeping the process going. At that point, there was an outline of the code, and now we have a draft of a 60-page document that still is being worked through with staff as well for revisions and comments. But we want an opportunity to kind of focus in on some of the high points of the plan, especially looking at the downtown bamboo piece and some ideas that have been provided that Galena and DPZ will be providing to City Council tomorrow evening. So Galena's going to go over a brief overview, and then the rest of this evening would be interactive for anyone who has a specific property that they want to address or have specific questions on. The members of their team are right here. We can also have these post-it notes right here, and we can write on and write comments to the board as well, which will all be implemented in the public feedback that we receive. So I'll let Galena take it on at this point.
Thank you, Arlene. Do you hear me? It's like a little hear myself, but anyway. All right. If you want, you can come up here, or we can move the drawings, or probably I will do a little bit of introduction, and then if you would like to come close to the drawings, it is not a very big group, so it will be probably better if you're closer to the drawings. So, of course, these are just a few of the illustrations which we have in the document. Here it is. This is the large first draft. It is we have on every page, we put in big red capital letters. This is for discussion purposes only, and it is a draft, so it is not something which is in no way, set in stone, or it's an operational document yet. It's just the beginning. This is our first attempt to put this document together. We call it a form-based code. And in our prior meetings and workshops, which were not only in February, but we had like several last year, we started with a big study, the land use study for Bonita Beach Road, and then we went into looking at the downtown. So there were these are two very different projects. We had a document, an introductory document, which was called an Introduction to the Form-Based Code, which actually explains kind of the main ideas, the main goals of this whole exercise. If you have not been made familiar with this document, I will encourage you, if you want to know a little bit more why we're doing this and how the whole process came about, I encourage you that you look at this document. Do we have it so we can, I think that it's right there. So we can just show it for your information. It shows basically your own history as a community, how this came about. Why did you all of a sudden wake up one day and said, we would like a form-based code? This has been a process for you. You have invested a lot in your infrastructure, in your downtown infrastructure. You won awards already on the infrastructure, the road work, the roundabouts, which you have done, and you have basically paid for it, and it's right there. Everybody can see it. What you need now is the private sector to be energized and to start investing. And we already have seen this happening with at least two big projects, the Mosaic and then the upcoming Terry Street project. They have been going through a lot of hoops and a lot of permitting and comp plan amendments and all of that because the current code which you have does not allow for some of the urban intensities which are appropriate for an urban core, which is your downtown, your town basically center. So the goal of this form-based code is to welcome investment, to welcome development, but within the vision of the community, which we loud and clear, we heard that you don't want to be Naples, or you don't want to be downtown Fort Myers, which they went a little bit too ambitious and built high-rises, huge high-rises. You already have development of these sorts, on the beach, along the beach, and in other areas, the different type of kind of resort experience. What you wanted as a community to maintain is the character of the downtown with some of its historic fabric, smaller scale, pleasant, a kind of a little bit more laid back. We heard and we read in some of your prior documentation in your meetings that you want to have a kind of the feeling of something like Key West and all of that, but also to be Bonita Springs. You have enough history and also very good urban fabric, existing fabric, and with the new investment in the infrastructure, this is a great combination for a new development. We also heard very loud and clear that a good thing for the whole community is to keep and also to attract young people. For many reasons, Bonita Springs has been very attractive to seniors and to the snowbirds and to retirees, but it is difficult for young people to invest or to come and live here because it's either that the housing is not available, or it is expensive in the places where it's available, and we heard, look, we will move from up north to come and work here or work in Naples, for example. Our commute will be shortened, but it's not available for us. So in the housing stock which you currently have in the downtown, you have houses and almost nothing else. We see that there will be probably townhouses. I don't think that there are any built. I know that there will be, maybe they are in the kind of the thinking that there will be built, townhouses, but like small apartment buildings and all live-work units, apartments above stores, all the things which are the elements of a form-based place or a kind of the small resort downtown, they're missing. So this is what this form-based code will try to accomplish. So all of these things are briefly described in this document, which is, I believe, available on your website, so you can go and see it. And this first draft, it's based on these first assumptions, which, this basically from the council voted on for us to move from this introduction to the next stage, which is a kind of the technical document. And it's not that interesting, in terms of, it's a technical document. We try to make it, to put a lot of illustrations, but they're just illustrative. These illustrations, and I will point out to some of them that we didn't represent all the different options. We try to exhaust all the possibilities how this downtown can be built, but we couldn't think of all the options. Like, for example, in our Transect Zone core, we forgot to include the galleries, a gallery frontage, which is very important, which is basically a structure, light structure to protect from the sun. And it's allowed in the writing, but we forgot to illustrate it. So all of this coordination will be done together with staff. Tomorrow we have a meeting with them, and also other meetings with the, I think it's, yes, with the council members in the afternoon. So this will be also information, basically from the leadership, what they want to see, and to familiarize themselves with the document. It will be probably, the document will be made available. I don't know exactly when, but obviously everybody will be able to comment, to come, to read, to see. So after this presentation, you can come here at the boards, and we can discuss the issues. So the document, as Arlene pointed out, is more than 60 pages. We are slightly embarrassed that it's so long. We would like to shorten it. We would like to make it more user-friendly. The whole purpose of these documents is that they are clear, understandable, illustrative but also regulatory, and also they basically are the mold through which um, all new development will go through, and at the end it will be your vision. You know, that's a kind of idealized situation. We have been doing these processes for more than 30 years, and we have, you know, successes around the country. The closest one is Naples, which actually we heard from many of you that you don't want to be exactly like Naples, that you like some aspects of Naples. I'm talking about their main street, which is Fifth Avenue South. And, you know, we hear, yeah, we like it, but it's too much traffic, or it's, you know, I don't know what, it's like too busy, the garages don't work, you know, but it's a successful place. So some people like it, some people don't like it. But it will be, you know, the downtown Bonita Springs will be actually different. Let's hope that it will be your vision. So the table of contents, which was approved by the council members in February, consisted of these 14 chapters, and we basically filled in with contents the 14 chapters, and I can more or less go through them very fast just to list them. You know, we have the general provisions, which will include the intent, the application of the code. We introduced the concept of the transact. I don't know whether I see some familiar faces, so I'm sure that you have heard about the transact. These are basically the new zoning categories. These are baskets of different uses which we combine in larger areas, so we don't, your basically zoning map doesn't look like the one which is here on the left, which is the town center concept plan, where, you know, smaller parcels are zoned separately, like with a very specific use. But actually, in these transact zones, there will be more flexibility. You will be able to do many more things in terms of function and use. But we call this a form-based code, meaning that the form of the building has to have a kind of a stable and predictable look. So for us, the most important thing will be how the building meets the frontage and how it creates the public realm, not so much what the building actually has as a function. So for example, we talk about a townhouse. You know, a townhouse is like attached building type, 2 or 3 stories. And a townhouse very easily can become, you know, a mixed-use building. Like on the ground floor, it can have an office, you know, a home office. It can have a little store, a business, which can be rented separately. You have living accommodation above, and you have a rental business below, or it's your own live-work unit. That's why we call it live-work unit. So this is the type of flexibility we're talking about. Or a small apartment building, which is, let's say, 2 or 3 stories with 4 to 6 units. You can have the ground floor either as a, you know, a nice first floor apartment, which is good for a senior, you know, some senior residents, or you can have a shop, a corner shop, or you can have a small cafe on the ground floor. So this is the type of flexibility in use which will be kind of more widely introduced in your downtown. Then we have basically the next thing are the boundaries of the downtown, which here you can see we are proposing a slight expansion of your downtown to include in the northwest portion some of your sports fields. And what were the buildings there? The library? The middle school, the old library. So they make sense to be included in your downtown. So we expanded there. And in certain other areas where we felt that it will be nice to have this new document to basically cover the 2 sides of a street. So you don't have one side of the street with the old way and then the other side with the new way, but to include the whole street. To cut actually the boundary in the middle of the lot and not in the middle of the street. Of the block, I'm sorry, instead of in the middle of the street, you know. So you have a more symmetrical condition on both sides of along the streets. Also, this new map shows in different colors the different transect zones, and they're explained in this general provision section. And here with the darkest blue, we have transect zone 6, which is the most urban, kind of the most intense urban core, which is just the dark blue. The next dark blue is the transect zone T5 edge, which actually I don't like this name. Edge, it's urban, but edge. It's a kind of a little bit contradictory, so we probably need to think of another name. In the darkest area, actually, what is the difference with the lighter? In the darker area, the retail frontage is, in most cases, is required. It's mandatory, because this will be the place for really a kind of the main street businesses to be allocated. In the rest of the T5, which is the T5 edge currently, the retail is allowed, but it's not required. So there is the flexibility. And we are showing it in our illustrations. We are showing buildings which actually can transition from residential or commercial. They can actually start as residential and go to commercial, or vice versa. It depends how your architecture is designed. It's not something unheard of, and it has been done all around the country in other circumstances. And then we have the next zone, which is T4, which consists of kind of a wider variety of building types. It includes, houses and townhouses and live-work units, which I mentioned, and also the small apartment buildings, which I mentioned, and houses, single-family houses. So it's basically a kind of a basket for the variety, the most a kind of wide variety in the neighborhood. And then the T3, which is we have two categories: an open and restricted, is the mostly residential single-family housing. With the restricted are in the areas where there are more historic houses and neighborhoods which will predominantly keep their residential character. In the open, we allow for home occupation and accessory units in the back. Then we have, I went into this a little bit more. The second section is districts and overlays, where all of these details are described. So I kind of described them before that. We will have also a historic district, and it is not necessarily a big district, though we have here, you help me with this. This one is the hatched. Actually, the hatch shows historic properties. So this one, what was this one? Oh, the shelf, of course. That's the Shangri-La. And then you see that we have a kind of a dispersal of historic properties around the downtown. Tomorrow morning we have a meeting with the historic preservation person from the city. So we will look through these and see whether they're the correct places, and what the requirements will be for these. Okay. And then we have the next section actually describes the uses. You currently have in your code a lot of a kind of descriptive uses, and we just discussed this. It will try to put them in larger categories, so you don't have all types of different shops described. I mean, when there is retail, that it will be under a bigger category, the residential and all of these. There is a table here which summarizes the different uses by kind of big baskets: residential, commercial, lodging, manufacturing, which is light manufacturing, obviously, civic, public institutional, and some miscellaneous, and how they are basically related to the different transect zones, in which zones they fall. Then we have another one, which we have density by districts, which which I'm not sure exactly what it falls, what is the density by this. We can see it later, what it entails. Then we have the urban design standards and guidelines, which are, by the way, some of these drawings over there are summaries of these urban standards. They include form of the buildings, obviously. You know, this is a form-based code, which includes, and in the first the first 5 illustrations, you can see the lot size, the occupation, the coverage, setbacks, building height, building orientation, building massing, and the different types of frontages, elements, parking access, fences, and walls. I mean, it goes really detailed how you can basically shape the property, especially in the areas, especially in the frontage where it faces the public realm. This is the most important element. Then we have a section on architectural character, which goes to building materials, opening and walls, a lot of detail on storefronts. We have here an illustration, and we put it here because it is quite extensive. All kinds of different types of storefronts and their signage. You know, we have actually the signage is a separate section. Section 7 we have devoted on signage because it's extremely important. We experience many times, you know, main streets have nice buildings and nice storefronts, and the signage is awful, and it's really, in many cases, either you cannot see the merchandise inside, or it's not properly done, or it's probably too obvious in many cases, too large, and all of that, when it's not coordinated. And the goal is that we have, basically coordinated and nice looking and harmonious type of signage, which will be branding your main street, the retail frontages of your streets as the main street of Bonita Springs. So we go to screening, roofs, I mean details to that extent. Then we go into landscape standards and guidelines, landscape on private property and landscape in the public right-of-way. Some of these things you already have in your code, so we are not like inventing more limitations for you. We are just trying to kind of, there are probably more opportunities, but what is different this time is that some of these requirements we put where they belong. Like, for example, you know, the fence of certain type, you know, the picket fence is in T-zone 3, where we have the mostly single-family houses. You don't want to see a picket fence on the kind of the most urban transit zone, you know, T5 or, you know, T4 even. And then we have thoroughfare standards and guideline, their context, classification, and street design. I don't know whether we will need this. We may, because most of our streets are already done, especially kind of in the core area. We have to discuss the streets in the rest, in the T4 and in T3, whether we would like to provide some guidelines in that regard. Then section 10, which is the plan developments and assemblages, which are, we need to further coordinate with your current regulations. But are these the ones, the assemblages, Bonita Springs? I mean, the bamboo property, or it's a special district? Okay, so these basically the planned developments and assemblages will be somehow folded into the special districts, I imagine, because it's redundant, I believe, to have both. And then we have 11, which is the procedures for review. This is something which needs a lot of coordination. We have some ideas, but I think that we are just at the beginning. How to make the procedures for review easier and faster and not so time consuming, and appeals and variances. And then we have another one which is supplemental regulation and special topics. If we need a kind of a basket for things which are special and we just don't know where to put them, you know, and I mean, I don't exactly know what will be, but like, for example, in Miami we have sometimes, you know, piers and elements which are related to the water and stuff like that. In this case, we have the river, but it's under the special district, so we may not need that, but it can be like a kind of a section where instead of coming every time and amending this form-based code, you can have this section where you can put from time to time regulations or some amendments if you want. And then we have the last one, which is section 14, are the definitions. And this is something which, again, has to be worked on, because we notice that not all of our terminology, which is in the body of the text, is yet kind of transferred or coordinated with our definitions. You know, for, you know, like if you open it for the first time and you don't know what a transect is, it's explained. Or when I say a gallery, what a gallery means, and what is an arcade, and what is an awning, and what is, you know, whatever. I don't, you know, there are many terms which are actually, it's good to have common language, and these definitions are all the way in the back. So this is briefly the document. I mean, as I said, it's longish, and if I go over the whole thing, probably you will be asleep very soon, but I'm not going to do that. These drawings here show actually an illustration, and this was under a separate assignment from the city. We had done this study of the bamboo property, and actually it was a good exercise because it is one of our special districts, but of course it operates under this form-based code. Meaning that the buildings need to behave in certain way on the street, that they need to have certain character, you know, certain things like a gallery, balconies, the shape of the roof, and you know, elements of the form, the messing, the openings, and things like that. We are illustrating here how the code is becoming operational. Our task here was also to show several different variations within certain allowed densities as of today, and how they will look, you know, visually, what type of parking requirements there will be, whether it will be possible to provide extra parking, which can be used for municipal uses, you know, for the city, for the downtown. As we all know, you have here very big events. We just learned that you have the second largest art festival in the country, which was like very impressive. And we know that you have, you know, tens of thousands of people, and you have to accommodate, you know, but these are kind of events which are not that often. However, if you have some extra parking capacity in this district, it will be very welcome for the future development of the downtown, because these parking spots can help a kind of fill the rest of the fabric. They can be used for future development, and also allow for the smaller incremental growth of the place. Because if you have a small piece of land and you have to provide parking on site, you know, to the full extent of current regulations, which actually, by the way, I didn't mention that. It is also in the code, and I don't even remember in which section was it. I missed the parking requirements. We will try also to reduce. You know, the parking requirements these days are kind of overblown for the a kind of the future of our mobility. We know that many people use Uber and use other ways of moving around, starting very soon, especially the younger generation. I mean, it is a fact, and it is everywhere in the news, that millennials don't, you know, many of them haven't gotten even their licenses, you know, in their even 20s. I mean, even in our office, we have many people who live miles and miles away, and they either bike or Uber, which is quite quite something, but they just don't want to be burdened with car ownership. So this is just one aspect. But if you have a downtown which is walkable and which actually allows for, you know, for some of the office or work availabilities plus living, you know, this is also an option. Maybe somebody has their own business there and then live and work in the downtown, or they have a cafe, or they have a small business there and they live in the residential neighborhood. This is also a possibility. So we are proposing, currently you have in your code, you have a shared parking formula, and we are proposing even another one which is supposedly more generous, you know, allows for a little bit more flexibility, or to allow for sharing between different uses. Like for example, if you have an office use, it can be very well shared with a residential use, because the office operates during the day while the residential, you know, parking is used during the night. And things like this. And we have special, you know, percentages. It's also important, you know, to see during the week and the peak hours use and all of that. So there are, you know, tables which we have worked through the years. We'll see whether what we have proposed, and we have it here in the code, whether it will be the most appropriate for your condition. We still have the observation from our more than a year of being around here, coming here multiple times, that it is still a very car-oriented situation in Bonita Springs. Everybody drives, and you know, we had comments, you know, we're not going to bicycle, we are too old, we are not going to bicycle, and we're not going to walk, but we're going to drive till forever, I guess. Which actually, you know, it's also questionable, because at certain age you're not going to be able to drive, and you will need other ways of moving around, and probably walking, actually, not long distances, but if you have a compact and nice downtown, short distances, which they are pleasant and under shade, you know, protected, will be nice to provide. Parking in all cases, and here in the bamboo drawings, parking in all cases is always hidden or masked. It's not something in your face. You know, you have enough of car-oriented frontages, you know, along Bonita Beach Road, where the parking is exposed. You have plenty of that. So in your downtown, the parking will be hidden in most cases. You know, that's a kind of one of the big rules if you want to become a compact and mixed use, and also pedestrian friendly, but really pedestrian friendly downtown. If you have big gaps in your pedestrian experience, you know, people they just will not walk. You know, if you have, let's say, one building, two buildings, and then a big parking lot, which is the case today, by the way. You know, you have, you know, large, expensive, either empty land, or, you know, missing teeth, or, you know, parking. So you have to begin hiding the parking. And this have been done in our good places, good neighborhoods and cities for many years. And actually Bonita Springs, historically, the buildings were kind of fronting the street, and then there was no parking, I guess, before. So in this case, where in bamboo, the bamboo property will have the possibility of concentrating parking in larger quantities, and even perhaps in a parking garage, then you have to be very instrumental how to mask it, how to create, we call them liner buildings, when they're thin and smaller buildings hiding the parking, which can be useful building types. You know, they can be townhouses, they can be live work, small offices, you know, co-working space, they can be even city offices. Many different functions can be in these liner buildings. And of course, residential, which is in a kind of a larger footprints along 41 and along the river. We went through several iterations of these drawings, because we didn't take into consideration actually the floodplain in our first drawings, and now we have the real drawing. This actually allowed for a large park on the northern side. Here in all of the drawings, you can see this park for probably recreation, passive or active recreation. It's large enough for things like that, or even for some events with a small gazebo or maybe stage in one corner. And this is a kind of on the northern side, which will be open to the river. On the other side, we'll have, in all cases, we are suggesting some kind of retail one-story structures, which will be either restaurants or cafes. This will be actually regulated. This will be for public use, with the pedestrian street, which is on this side. The main street, actually, the street along the water will be on the southern portion, but there will be a kind of the possibility to go to the water through the structures. This is the intention, maybe with some places for outdoor sitting on the water, which will be quite interesting. The three different options show slightly different variations in intensity. The first two are similar in number of units. The first one is actually the most intense. As you can see, we are showing 2 parking garages, which is probably extensive, but this is, we wanted to explore all the options. The second one is surface parking to the north and still the bigger structure to the south. And in this third least intense version, we are proposing to the north a kind of a cluster or a little village of live-work units which form a small green space, potentially with galleries or some art focused businesses. And to the south, similarly, a garage with the residential. All of the, or most actually, of our frontage of the mixed-use buildings is with retail on the ground floor. So it's basically a kind of an area which everybody will be able to enjoy. It needs to be tailored very carefully because it is a lot of frontage, and it's probably, we don't want to over project retail and to have, boarded up stores right there on the water. These options, there will be, the city will be working on an RFP in the future, and hopefully these studies are informing this future bid for redevelopment of these sites. So if you want to come closer to the drawings and look at them, because these are, for me to describe them from such a distance is probably useless. And if you have any questions, please.
And I also did want to introduce, we have Councilwoman Laura Carr with us this evening, and we have Councilman Mike Gibson here. Just as a reminder of the sunshine, they won't be having individual discussions with themselves. They will be discussing that at the regular board meeting when we're recording during our regular council meeting. They're here participating as well. And I think at this point, we also, as we said, have the sticky notes to write comments on as well. We have the comment cards in the back. So if you'd like to provide any comments through the process, and then I think the team is here right now to everyone to come forward and take a closer look and ask any specific questions you have with the team members.
With the sticky notes, you can stay anonymous. Yes? The sheriff's office? Where is it now? Is it in the square, on the square? It's in the, okay. It's in the square.